Thank you, Catherine. Let me share my screen first. Okay. First of all, I'm very pleased to be here this morning. I'm much honored to share my work on positive youth development and adolescent adaptation. Catherine just said that we should use around 20 minutes to present and then leave around 10 minutes for discussion. So I will be quick. Okay, there will be three parts in my presentation. The first one is on theories. The second one is on research. And then the third part is on application. Okay, so positive youth development, PYD, is an approach within not just psychology. I would say it is quite an interdisciplinary concept. So what does that mean? It means we should look at the more positive aspects of young people, okay, instead of looking at the deficit or the problems. So if you look at mainstream psychology, most of the time we talk about storm and stress, we talk about deficits. And also in sociology, we also talk about adolescent problems. So for positive youth development, actually it looks more about the talent, strength, interest, and future potentials of young people. Actually, there are many models within this movement. I will just name a few and then give some examples as far as the theory is concerned. Okay, so I've written a paper. You can download this paper from the website. So I attempt to summarize some of the current perspectives within positive youth development. So basically, you can see that the first one most people talk about is the one on 40 developmental assets by Benson. I will talk about this in more details later on. And then the 5C or the 6C model by Richard Lerner from the Tufts University. And then the 15 positive youth development constructs by Richard Catalano, a sociologist at University of Seattle. Actually, he did a lot of work demonstrating how we can change the lives of not just young people, but the community, if we can really manipulate those positive youth development constructs. And then social emotional learning. I know that Singapore is now talking about this. Actually, I went over there, I think 10 years ago, and I share this with the colleagues with the Ministry of Education. And I'm glad that eventually they put a lot of emphasis on the social emotional learning now. In Hong Kong, in contrast, it is quite depressing to see that we don't actually put a lot of things on. And also the character and spirituality, also related to positive psychology, the model on character strength by Martin Seligman. Okay, so what I would do is I will just give some examples. Now, for the Bensons model, actually from the Search Institute, they talk about external assets and internal assets. Now, all these assets are closely related to adolescent adaptation. So the basic conjecture is that if we can promote those external and internal assets, adolescents can adapt well in their lives. Okay, so let me briefly run through this. Support. So you can see family support, family communication. I will give some example on this under research, okay? And of course, other relationship, caring neighborhood, caring school climate, parental involvement. So the first thing, very important, is support, whether adolescents got enough support from adults and the social environment. The next one is empowerment. Actually, whether community values youth is important. Whether we think that youth are troublesome, or whether we think, okay, they are very talented. Okay, youth as resources, service to others. I will give an example on service learning, and of course, safety. Good to know that both Hong Kong and Singapore were very safe cities, in contrast to say LA or New York or even inner London. Okay. Boundaries and expectations, I will not talk about much, but we need to have family boundaries, school boundaries, neighborhood boundaries. Good adult role models is important. So what we actually show in front of young people, positive peer influence, and constructive use of time, creative activities, youth program, etc. Okay, I will not talk about this much. You can look at the website, you can look at my paper. Now, for internal assets, interestingly, there are 5 assets related to learning. Now, which is quite similar to Chinese, okay? Because we always say that, okay, Chinese culture put a lot, too much emphasis on learning, and it is bad for adolescent development, but it is wrong. For Benson, actually, achievement, motivation, school engagement, homework, bonding to school, even reading for pleasure are important for young people, okay? Positive values also, caring, equality, integrity, honesty, responsibility, restraint, okay? If you know psychology well, you know that we have tried to escape this in the 1970s when we talk about the black box approach, behavioral, but now I think in the past 20 years, people begin to talk about values more because that is the fundamental factor that shape our beliefs about the world, okay? And also social competence. This is what the world is trying to do now. In fact, for United Nations, within the United States, they talk about a lot about social competence. That is, as young people, you need to plan, make good decisions. You need to have good interpersonal competence, cultural competence, resistance skills, say no to drugs, say no to violence, say no to bullying, and also peaceful conflict resolution. Okay, this is what Hong Kong lacks. I think in the past few years, we all feel that we do not know how to resolve conflict in a peaceful manner, okay? And finally, positive identity. Okay, and of course, the sense of purpose is important, particularly when we talk about studying. How come we found a purpose in studying? Because for young people, most of the time, they think that I need to study well, otherwise I will be a beggar. I think a lot of parents will say this: you better study well, otherwise you will become a beggar. So for young people, they really cannot find any sense of purpose in their study, okay? So another example I will give is the Castle model, that is social-emotional learning. You can also go to this website, the Castle organization, quite influential in the United States now. Basically talk about 5 things, and I know Singapore is doing this, emphasizing the importance of self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. And the basic argument here is that if young people do not have such skills, most of the time problems will arise, okay? And there are lots of SEL programs in the States, I think thousands of them. I will show you some meta-analysis study later on, okay? So that is my first part. And of course, the last one is the 15 positive youth development constructs highlighted by Richard Catalano at the University of Seattle. He reviewed 77 positive youth development programs in the States. And then he found out that only around 25 of them are working. And amongst those programs, he found that those programs emphasize on bonding, resilience, competence, self-determination, self-efficacy, spirituality, etc., etc. Okay, so we can say that these are workable and promising constructs that can help young people. Okay, I will give you some examples based on my work. Now, the first one is on how parental control and parent-child relational qualities, how it affects internet addiction. Okay, so the basic hypothesis is if we got good bonding with parents, actually the adolescent developmental mental outcomes will be better. Okay, so here you can see that for those with higher parental behavioral control, actually the internet addiction is lower. Of course, it is gradually going up. Okay, because parents' influence in adolescent will gradually drop. And also we found for psychological control, it is quite obvious. If parents exercise high psychological control, internet addiction will be higher. Okay. So another example also from bonding is systemic family function, because what I just talked about, this is a dyadic parent-child relational quality. So for systemic, we're talking about family communication as a whole, family climate as a whole. So you can see that family function actually affect positive youth development, and then it affects delinquent behavior. And in the Chinese culture, we found that there are 5 dimensions here. The first one is mutuality, communication, conflict, and also 2 parent-child relational qualities here. Okay, so this research, actually there are many. Basically tell us that external assets, internal assets are very important for adolescent adaptation. And the last example I will give is surface learning, because if you go back to Benson's saying, he said that surface contribution to the community actually will positively shape adolescent development. Okay, so this is what we did under COVID. We have surface learning at PolyU. We now have more than 70 subjects with almost 4,000 students every year they serve. Okay, so we still continue the surface learning under the pandemic, and then we conduct a very simple pre and post test. Okay, so you can see that this is the pre, and this is the post, and basically you can see that the students actually change in a positive direction after they have taken surface learning. Okay, so this is a very promising tool. I always encourage universities to adopt. That is, you teach a subject using surface learning as a pedagogy, and in fact, students change, and then you can see the change in a much positive direction. Okay. Now the last example, the last part, is on positive youth development programs. So as I mentioned, in the West, tons of research have been done. Let us look at some of the effect. Okay, so the first one is quite a sizable sample. You can see 213 school-based socio-emotional learning programs. Okay, and they found that relative control, actually, the experimental participants, they did better in terms of socio-emotional learning skills, attitude, and also they got gain in academic achievement. So for educators or for policymakers, they always ask the question, how can we encourage the students to study better? And my answer now is try surface learning, because empirically you can see actually it is an 11 percentile point gain in academic achievement. Okay, another meta-analytic study, 82 school-based, also quite a large sample. The experimental group participants, they did better in terms of socio-emotional learning skills, attitudes, and indicator of well-being. Now, this is very important because we see that student well-being is a very troublesome topic nowadays. We see that kids got depression, anxiety, and the benefit is very similar regardless of the student's race, socioeconomic background, or school location. Again, it is a very quote-unquote cheap way of prevention. So if we can teach the kids about social emotional learning. That is, you understand yourself, you understand others, you make good decision making, and then you got good self-management, and you got good relationship with other people. Then a lot of problems will disappear. Okay. Another one, effectiveness. For this one, it focused more on the problem behavior, behavioral problem, sexual risky behavior, etc., etc. So the result is still very positive, but the probably because the sample is not large, so it got a small but significant effect on academic achievement and psychological adjustment. Okay. Now, worldwide, you can see that there is much interest in positive youth development. Spring, this is Spring. Spring has published a handbook on positive youth development last year, and more than 20 countries, colleagues from more than 20 countries, they contribute work on that, and in fact, a lot of government are now seeing the value of promoting positive youth development amongst young people. Okay, so in Hong Kong, what we did this program for 19 years, and it has stopped. So what we did is we developed programs, and then we implement them in more than 200 schools. And what we did is we use a longitudinal experimental design. We randomize the students to experimental group and control group. And then you can see that because at that time I was still the chairman of the Action Committee Against Narcotics. So I'm very pleased to see this. You can see that for the control group, they got higher level of substance abuse. Okay, so it is a very good way of reducing substance abuse amongst young people, particularly ketamine, because we know 10 years ago ketamine was very serious problem in Hong Kong. But now I think Zheng Yuhua knows this. He is an expert on drug. So now we have changed back to cannabis and also ice. Okay, but 10 years ago ketamine was very, very serious problem in Hong Kong. So we see the difference for those kids who have joined the program. Okay, also delinquency. Okay, so I talked to the government. If you really want to reduce delinquency, teach the young kids about social emotional learning, positive youth development. Okay, problem behavior intention as well. So in one paper, roughly 10 years ago, Prof was included as one of the evidence-based program in a paper in Lancet. So I think it is good because you can see that most of the studies elsewhere are not Chinese studies, and this is the first one included in Lancet, and I think we should be pleased about this, and I look forward to more. So it is very good that Catherine got a grant, and then Zheng Yuhua also got a grant doing some longitudinal stuff. I think it is very good, and eventually we can think about prevention. Okay, and recently we have also used the data to write the paper on thriving, because this is the ideal we want. What does thriving mean? It simply means a good development. We all want our kids to develop well, okay? So we use the path data over a wave. You can see something like this. At the beginning, thriving are more or less similar. But the sad thing is, in Hong Kong, thriving began to drop, at least perceived thriving, okay? And then for the experimental group, they drop slower, they drop less as compared to the control group. So in a way, it still has some protective function. And then we also implement the program in China. We got with the support from Tin Ka Bing Foundation. We are now having the Tin Ka Bing Path project in China. We did it in more than 30 Tin Ka Bing schools, and we found something like this. So you can see that for general positive development, actually the experimental group did better eventually, okay, although they started lower. And also for this, also a drop in life satisfaction, but for the experimental group, they drop less, not so fast, and also for depression, okay. At the start, they got a high level of depression, but eventually lower, a very clear interaction effect here. So, right, so I have to stop here, 20 minutes. Okay, let us work together to promote the resilience of young people because we believe students can shine and thrive. Thank you.